Hello, my dear jewellery enthusiasts. The treasure trove of the British royal family holds numerous luxurious adornments, including the Vladimir tiara and Queen Elizabeth II's aquamarine diadem. However, the most valuable specimens, not in terms of stone weight but from a historical perspective, undoubtedly belong to Queen Victoria, the great-grandmother of Elizabeth. Her beloved Prince Albert not only showered his spouse with jewellery gifts but also personally engaged in their design, incorporating symbols understood only by him and Victoria into each new creation. One such gift was a tiara made of gold and silver with sapphires, Albert's favourite colour, blue, and diamonds, crafted by jeweller Joseph Kitching. Albert's design was based on the coat of arms of Saxony. Before marrying the Queen, he held the title of Prince of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha within the Saxon-Coburg-Gotha dynasty. The tiara was intended to complement a brooch with sapphires and diamonds, which the young Queen received on the eve of her wedding. Later, the pair was completed with earrings and a bracelet featuring the same combination of precious stones. The prince presented the tiara around July 1842, indicated by the fact that later that same year, Queen Victoria posed wearing it in her most famous portrait by Franz Xaver Winterhalter, which was later distributed worldwide. In the painting, Victoria is depicted in a pearly white dress, her hair styled in a low bun. The tiara, showcasing Albert's imaginative design, could be closed into a small crown or spread out into a coronet. The ornament consists of small links, thanks to diamond inlay. Their joints are almost imperceptible, creating the illusion that the tiara, adorned with 11 impressive sapphires, gently bends in the hands. After her husband's death in 1861, the Queen rarely wore large jewels, but the sapphire tiara remained her favourite. It was this tiara that she wore to the opening of Parliament, her first public appearance as a widow. Instead of the official crown, the tiara, once again closed into a ring, adorned her headpiece, and it was in this attire that she was immortalised by Henry Richard Graves in the 1874 portrait. The tiara was inherited by the Queen's descendants. Victoria's grandson, King George V, gifted the precious heirloom to his eldest daughter, Princess Marie, upon her marriage to Herwood. Her photos in the tiara testify once again to Albert's foresight. Marie wore the tiara in the fashion of the 1920s, as a bandeau lowered low on the forehead. In a similar fashion, the tiara was worn by one of Marie's descendants at a wedding in 1992. Since the late 90s, the tiara has frequently appeared in the social chronicles and has been exhibited worldwide until it was sold abroad. When it became known that this national treasure would leave Albion, a real scandal erupted. Fortunately, entrepreneur William Bollinger purchased the jewel for $6 million and donated it to the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, where it rightfully belongs. Another equally remarkable item from Victoria's collection is the emerald tiara, created by the Queen's jeweller Joseph Kitching and gifted to Albert in 1845. The jewel is not devoid of symbolism. Emeralds are still considered the birthstone for those born in May, making this accessory particularly significant, given that Queen Victoria was born on May 24th. Sotheby's experts note that Cleopatra adorned herself and her palaces with these precious stones, presenting them as gifts to dignitaries. Perhaps the only hidden meaning that resonated most with Victoria's romantic feelings was that emeralds could reveal spells, or expose falsehoods in a chosen one's vows. She wore her trophy on the most important occasions related to Albert, showcasing the profound connection with her spouse. For instance, at an official banquet in honour of Prince Albert's election as Chancellor of the University of Cambridge in 1847. Moreover, she chose the emerald tiara over traditional royal jewels from the vaults when posing for the artist Franz Xaver Winterhalter, who painted the royal family portrait in the same year. Nonetheless, the most famous is the small diamond crown in which the Queen is portrayed in her later years in many portraits and photographs. It is considered that this crown is most closely associated with the image of Queen Victoria. The small diamond crown was manufactured in 1870 by the royal jeweller Gerard and Company at the request of the Queen herself, who planned to wear the crown over her widow's cap. After the death of her husband Prince Albert in 1861, Victoria mourned until her own death in 1901, and in the early years of mourning, she even withdrew from public life, earning the nickname Widow of Windsor. However, state affairs prevented her from leading a secluded life for long, and by the 1870s, she returned to political life but rejected the existing crown of the British Empire. Victoria considered the crown too heavy, and it was impossible to wear it over the widow's cap. The new crown was made of silver and adorned with 1187 diamonds of classic and rose cuts, with a total weight of 132 carats. In designing the crown, jewellers Gerard and Company looked to the previous British royal crowns. On the openwork frieze of the crown's base, alternating heraldic lilies and Maltese crosses can be seen once again. Two perpendicular arches, crowned with a miniature sphere called Mond with another Maltese cross, are attached to the crosses. The crown has a diameter of only 9 centimeters, and its total weight is 160 grams. Queen Victoria first wore the new crown at the opening of Parliament in 1871, and thereafter wore it at all important state events, including the celebration of the Golden Jubilee in 1887 and the Diamond Jubilee in 1897. A little earlier, in 1885, Victoria commissioned Austrian portraitist Heinrich von Angeli for her new official portrait. On a colossal portrait measuring 250 by 167 centimeters, Victoria is depicted in profile, standing in full height in front of the throne, with her head slightly turned toward the viewer. The Queen is adorned in a black satin dress with white lace on the sleeves and ermine fur along the hem of the train. She wears a sash across her chest, the Star of the Order of the Garter, and the insignias of the Royal Order of Victoria and Albert and the Imperial Order of the Indian Crown. A white lace veil is worn on Victoria's head, attached to which is the small diamond crown. The posing sessions took place in the winter-spring of 1885. The Queen frequently wrote about the progress of the work in her journal and letters. On March 9th, she wrote that the portrait is becoming beautiful, and by March 20th, it already seemed to her magnificent, and particularly the black satin turned out amazingly. By early April 1885, the portrait, apparently, was completed because in a letter to her daughter, Victoria noted that Angeli had surpassed himself in this work. Soon, like many previous official portraits of Queen Victoria, this portrait was reproduced in numerous copies. A whole series of other well-known portraits of Queen Victoria was created in the early 1880s, not by portrait painters, but by photographer Alexander Bassano. He captured the Queen standing and sitting, in full height and close-up in various poses. One of the bust portraits of Queen Victoria, where her figure is turned 3/4 to the viewer, and her head is in semi-profile, became the official photographic image of the Queen and was circulated during the celebrations of the Golden and Diamond Jubilees. In 1880, Bassano also captured the small diamond crown separately without Queen Victoria. In the photo, it can be seen that the crown was permanently attached to the white lace veil, and in addition to this complex headdress, there was also an additional diamond band, apparently designed to better secure the veil and crown on the head. Interestingly, despite the fact that the small diamond crown became a replacement for the state imperial crown, during Victoria's lifetime, it did not belong to the state jewels but was her personal ornament. Only after Victoria's death, according to her will, did the small diamond crown become part of the crown jewels. The crown was worn by Queen Alexandra after Victoria's death, as evidenced by surviving photographs. Later, the jewel passed to Queen Mary, but I could not find any photos of her wearing this crown, although according to written sources, she appeared in it during the period before the death of her husband, King George V. The next queen, Elizabeth Bosleon, refused to wear the small diamond crown, and King George VI transferred the jewel to the Tower of London, where it was put on public display and where it remains to this day.
No less stunning is the Eastern tiara diadem of Queen Victoria, which was crafted by Prince Albert in 1853. This magnificent tiara, adorned with lotus flowers within 17 arches in the Mughal style, was set with 2,600 diamonds by Garrards in London at a cost of around $860. Originally, it included opals, one of Prince Albert's favorite gemstones. The tiara was accompanied by an opal necklace, earrings, and brooch ordered by Queen Victoria after receiving the Eastern crown. The Queen frequently wore the tiara with the earrings and brooch for portraits, but after her cousin, the King of Hanover, successfully took royal jewels in 1858, Queen Victoria shattered several old jewels and was forced to purchase new diamonds to replace those removed from the Eastern diadem, Though she did not wear it during her long widowhood, Queen Victoria designated the Eastern tiara as a royal relic upon her death in 1901 to be worn by future queens by right. No less exquisite, Queen Victoria's strawberry leaf tiara. Initially created by Joseph Kitching in 1844, this tiara was altered by Gerards in 1848 and again in 1860 when Prince Albert added strawberry leaves, scrolls, and rubies to the original ruby and diamond bandeau design. Princess Beatrice added a further row of diamond elements at the base, and the tiara was modified one final time in 1933 by Cartier when the Marchioness of Carisbrooke removed the rubies. Queen Victoria was depicted wearing the original bandeau in Franz Xaver Winterhalter's 1855 portrait. The Queen was so enamored with the tiara that the ruby parure became one of the few colored gemstones she wore during mourning, especially at her daughter Princess Louise's wedding to the Marquis of Lorne in 1871. After her death in 1901, Queen Victoria bequeathed the tiara and parure to her youngest daughter, Princess Beatrice. Princess Beatrice added more elements at the base and wore the tiara in a portrait by Spanish artist Joaquín Sorolla y Bastida, as well as during the christenings of several of her grandchildren. In the late 1920s, Princess Beatrice loaned the strawberry leaves tiara to her daughter-in-law, Queen Victoria Eugenie of Spain. At some point in the 1930s, Princess Beatrice passed the tiara to her son and daughter-in-law, the Marquis and Marchioness of Carisbrooke, who had the piece redesigned by Cartier in 1933, removing the rubies. After the late 1930s, the tiara disappeared from view, and its current whereabouts are unknown, though it is likely that it was either sold or broken. In 2009, a diamond brooch pendant, believed to be a rhomboidal piece from the tiara, was sold at a Bonhams auction, and in May 2016, a brooch with rubies and diamonds, which was part of the parure, was sold at Christie's. But now let us move on to the next adornment, the Queen Victoria fringe tiara. Throughout most of her life, Queen Victoria's jewelry was either designed or gifted by Prince Albert or her family, high-ranking officials and dignitaries, making this particular piece utterly unique, as it was commissioned by Queen Victoria herself in 1866. This diamond fringe tiara with a sunray design was worn at her first state opening of Parliament after Prince Albert's death in the same year. Given its small size and lightweight design, it was worn in her later years, especially for her diamond jubilee portraits when other tiaras were retired. After Queen Victoria's death, her diamond fringe tiara, like the strawberry leaf tiara, was inherited by her youngest daughter, Princess Beatrice, who wore the fringe tiara over her small diamond meander bandeau. This configuration was notably worn during her brother King Edward VII's coronation in 1902 and her nephew King George V's coronation in 1911. While the fate of Queen Victoria's fringe tiara after Princess Beatrice remains unknown, the meander bandeau base was passed on to her only daughter, Queen Victoria Eugenie of Spain, who wore it in a portrait by Laszlo in the 1920s. The meander bandeau was often worn by her daughter, Infanta Beatrice, but its whereabouts after the 1930s remain unclear, though it likely still belongs to the Torlonia family. Another remarkable piece is Queen Adelaide's fringe. Commissioned by King William IV for Queen Adelaide using diamonds that once belonged to King George III and Queen Charlotte, the piece was created by Rundle and Bridge in 1831. The diamond fringe was depicted as a necklace in several portraits of Queen Adelaide. The diamond fringe was gifted to Queen Victoria in 1837, upon her accession to the throne, and was worn as a tiara at a gala performance in November of that year. She continued to wear the fringe throughout the early decades of her reign. The tiara was notably featured in Winterhalter's The 1st of May, 1851, and at Prince Albert's Great Exhibition. Most of the current jewels in the Queen's possession do not predate Queen Victoria, as earlier pieces were reclaimed and transferred to the King of Hanover in 1858. However, this fringe somehow managed to evade that fate, making it one of the oldest pieces in the Queen's collection. In her later years, Queen Victoria often wore the Hanoverian fringe as a decoration on her bodices, particularly in her diamond jubilee portraits. She also mentioned wearing the piece as a necklace in her famous journals. Queen Adelaide's fringe was designated a crown heirloom upon Queen Victoria's death in 1901 and was worn by her daughter-in-law, Queen Alexandra, who placed the Hanoverian fringe around her waist during her coronation at Westminster Abbey in 1902. Her successor, Queen Mary, mounted the Hanoverian fringe onto a tiara frame and was photographed wearing it several times before World War I. However, Queen Mary later commissioned her own fringe tiara in 1919, which was later worn by Queen Elizabeth II at her wedding in 1947. For decades, the two tiaras were mistaken for each other, even within the palace. Queen Adelaide's fringe came into the possession of Queen Elizabeth after King George VI's accession in 1936, when it was converted back into a necklace by Gerard, who added a hidden clasp to the piece. The Queen Mother, as she became known, retained the Hanoverian fringe until her death in 2002. Queen Elizabeth II inherited Queen Adelaide's fringe, but since she already had Queen Mary's fringe tiara and the rarely worn City of London fringe necklace, the historic Hanoverian fringe has yet to be worn in public. Moving on to the next dazzling piece, the coronation necklace and earrings. In 1858, after Queen Charlotte's diamond riviere was transferred to the King of Hanover as part of the Hanoverian claims, Queen Victoria commissioned a replacement from Gerard for $65, using 28 stones taken from two of her garter badges and the hilt of a sword with the 22.48-carat Lahore diamond, formerly part of the Timur ruby necklace, as the centerpiece. Two pear-shaped diamonds from the original bracelet of the famous Koh-i-Noor diamond, weighing 12 and 7 carats respectively, were transformed into earrings. In 1859, Queen Victoria was depicted wearing her new diamond necklace and earrings in a Winterhalter portrait, and they were among the relatively few jewels she continued to wear during her long widowhood. Unlike her successors, Queen Victoria preferred to wear the necklace alone, without layering it with other pieces. Upon her death, the necklace and earrings were left to the crown to be worn by future queens by right. Queen Alexandra wore the necklace at her coronation in 1902, as did Queen Mary at her coronation in 1911, starting a tradition in which every queen since Victoria has worn them at her coronation, earning the set its iconic status. Both Queen Alexandra and Queen Mary preferred to wear the necklace with multiple other diamond necklaces, as was fashionable at the time. Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, wore the coronation necklace and earrings at her coronation in 1937 and frequently thereafter, including for the famous Cecil Beaton portrait series, almost always layered with her coronation necklace. Queen Elizabeth II wore the coronation necklace and earrings at her own coronation in 1953 and continued to wear them frequently in the following years, always as a single necklace, like Queen Victoria. The coronation necklace and earrings have remained some of the most significant jewels worn by the Queen on overseas visits throughout her reign. Queen Camilla wore the coronation necklace at the coronation of King Charles III and Queen Camilla at Westminster Abbey in 2023. Another stunning piece from the collection is Queen Victoria's fringe brooch. In 1856, Queen Victoria commissioned a large diamond corsage chain, known as the Chain de Corsage, from crown jeweler Gerard, using diamonds from a piece gifted by Ottoman Sultan Abdülmecid III, likely after the Crimean War. All that remains today is a large emerald-cut diamond, surrounded by 12 sizable diamonds, from which 9 graduated pampils dangle. Queen Victoria wore the original diamond corsage chain in Winterhalter's famous portrait, featuring the George IV state diadem, but removed it after Prince Albert's death, deeming it too grand for mourning. In 1870, Queen Victoria ordered the large diamond corsage chain to be partially dismantled, with some diamonds incorporated into the small diamond crown, while the remaining brooch was worn in portraits well into her later years. One of the most famous brooches is Queen Victoria's bow brooches. After losing many family jewels to the King of Hanover in 1858, Queen Victoria commissioned these 3 diamond brooches, 2 large and 1 slightly smaller, from Gerard, using more than 500 diamonds from her personal collection. Although she was never depicted wearing them, Queen Victoria declared the bow brooches a crown jewel upon her death in 1901, meaning they would pass from queen to be worn by future queens as their rightful property. Queen Alexandra and Queen Mary creatively hung diamonds from the brooches as pendants, using them as corsages and skirt decorations, often wearing all 3 together. Later, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, wore only 1 brooch more traditionally, though sometimes she adorned her hat with them. Another stunning piece is Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee necklace. To celebrate Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee in 1887, a women's committee raised money for a commemorative statue of her late husband, Prince Albert. The fundraiser was so successful that they collected far more than required and decided the surplus should be donated to the St. Catherine's Nurses Fund, while others wanted to buy a necklace for the Queen. Both plans were approved by the Queen, but there was opposition, and she exchanged the jewel, saying she would immediately swap it for another precious stone. Eventually, in 1888, Queen Victoria received the diamond and pearl necklace from Carrington & Co. for $5,000, which she left to the crown upon her death. Next, we turn to Queen Victoria's pearl earrings. The Queen received these pendant earrings with a large pear-shaped pearl hanging from 2 diamonds, which she wore with a round pearl, from her husband, Prince Albert, in 1847. The diamond studs were from the royal collection. The earrings were left to the crown after her death in 1901 to be worn by future queens by right. While Queen Alexandra, Queen Mary, and Queen Elizabeth are known not to have worn large earrings, Queen Victoria's pearl earrings became one of Queen Elizabeth II's favorite pieces soon after her accession to the throne. Another remarkable jewel is the Diamond Jubilee of Hesse brooch. This magnificent brooch, shaped like an open heart with the number 60 in Slavonic letters, made of diamonds and surrounded by a diamond heart with a sapphire cabochon on top and 2 sapphire pendants, was a gift to Queen Victoria for her Diamond Jubilee from her Hessian grandsons, the surviving children of her late daughter, Princess Alice, in 1897. It was displayed at the Imperial Institute in London. The piece was bequeathed to Princess Christian, whose jewels eventually found their way to the Queen Mother and later to the Queen. The brooch remained unworn in public for over a century until it was worn by the Duchess of Cornwall during her visit to the United States in 2007. Next is the Queen Victoria diamond bracelet. This 5-link diamond bracelet, each link containing 9 significant-sized diamonds surrounded by diamond foliage, was made for Queen Victoria in 1838, shortly after her accession to the throne, using diamonds from her collection. After being featured in her official portraits for the Golden and Diamond Jubilees, the diamond bracelet was designated a crown jewel upon her death in 1901, meaning it would pass from queen to queen. A dazzling jewel is the Queen Victoria Diamond Jubilee brooch. This Gerard brooch, featuring a large central pearl surrounded by diamond scrolls with a detachable row of diamonds and a pearl pendant, was a gift to Queen Victoria from current and former members of the royal court for her Diamond Jubilee in 1897. Although she was not pictured wearing it, Queen Victoria declared it a crown jewel upon her death in 1901. Queen Alexandra wore the brooch on her dress during the state opening of Parliament in 1902. The Queen Victoria Diamond Jubilee brooch became a favorite of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, after her husband ascended the throne in 1936. Like many other crown jewels, it remained with the Queen Mother after her daughter's ascension in 1952 and stayed a favorite for the following 5 decades, particularly worn on her 99th birthday in 1999. After the Queen Mother's death in 2002, the brooch finally passed to Queen Elizabeth II, who wore it several times, usually choosing to wear it without the detachable chain for daytime events. Let's continue with Queen Victoria's wheat ears brooches. 3 mirrored pairs of 2 brooches with diamond wheat ears set in silver and gold. 6 wheat ears brooches were commissioned from Rundle and Bridge by King William IV for Queen Adelaide in 1830. They featured stones from the royal collection, which had to be replaced when the King of Hanover reclaimed the Hanoverian jewels belonging to Queen Charlotte in 1858. The brooches were gifted to Queen Victoria in 1837 and were frequently worn to adorn her neck at official events during her later years. Next, let's look at Queen Victoria's 11-pearl brooch. This brooch, with 11 large pearls, 8 of which were set in exquisite diamond settings, with the remaining 3 as pendants, belonged to Queen Victoria. After her death in 1901, it was considered a family heirloom. Though Queen Victoria was only depicted wearing the 11-pearl brooch once, it became a favorite of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. She kept the brooch after her husband's death and her daughter's ascension to the throne. She wore it into her old age, including at some of her final birthday celebrations and her last Easter service. The brooch passed to Queen Elizabeth II in 2003 and was first publicly displayed during her 2009 Christmas broadcast. Since then, it has been worn frequently, including during her Christmas speech in 2016. Let's now turn to the ruby brooch. Queen Victoria's crown, a large oval ruby and diamond cluster topped by a pear-shaped ruby and diamond pendant. This brooch has 2 origin stories. The first suggests that the brooch was part of the opal and diamond parure acquired by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert from Garrard in 1854. It was left to the crown upon her death in 1901, but the opals, which Queen Alexandra considered unlucky, were replaced with rubies from a necklace given to Queen Victoria by the ruler of Nepal. However, Queen Victoria was depicted wearing a ruby brooch of a similar design and size several times, leading some to speculate that this brooch is an earlier piece unrelated to the crown ruby parure. Despite these changes, Queen Alexandra was never depicted in the parure, but her successor, Queen Mary, wore the crown ruby brooch in a portrait from the 1920s. This supports the first origin theory, as Queen Mary replaced the opals with rubies in the parure in 1926. When King George VI ascended the throne in 1936, the Oriental circlet tiara and the crown ruby parure became the property of Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, who wore them throughout her life. The crown ruby brooch, also belonging to the Queen Mother, was worn less frequently, such as during a portrait session, a visit to Rhodesia, and a Dutch banquet upon her return, supporting the theory that the brooch was initially not designed to match the crown ruby parure. Queen Elizabeth II first wore the crown ruby brooch at the Royal Ascot in 2015 and again a few days later with the crown ruby parure necklace and earrings at a state banquet in Germany. Another remarkable jewel is the gold brooch. This striking carved gold brooch features a silver or enameled cross at the top, with a large central pearl and another pearl pendant. The brooch's origin is unknown, but it was likely acquired by Queen Victoria herself. She notably wore it at the christening of her granddaughter, the future Crown Princess Margaret of Sweden, in 1882, and at the christening of her great-grandson, the future Earl of Mountbatten of Burma, in 1900.
Just a year before her wedding, Victoria's future husband presented her with a brooch in the form of an orange blossom as an engagement gift. Over the years, he added many pieces of orange blossom jewellery to her orange collection. In December 1845, he gave her a brooch and a pair of earrings, and in February 1846, he presented her with a tiara as a wedding anniversary gift. It also had flowers on it, 4 flowers representing the couple's 4 eldest children. Each year, Victoria would wear orange blossom jewellery for their wedding anniversary. The necklace and earrings were a gift from the Sultan of Turkey, presented to the princess on the day of her coronation. Both pieces of the set were made by the Jewellery House of Rundle, and bridge and set with diamond rosettes. 7 years after the occasion, Queen Victoria commissioned a portrait of herself in her wedding attire. As a wedding anniversary gift for Prince Albert, the picture was painted by her favourite artist, Franz Xaver Winterhalter. The portrait was completed in 1847. It was placed in the prince's private apartments at Windsor Castle. Interestingly, the portrait shows a piece of jewellery that is not in the other paintings from the wedding, a diamond and sapphire brooch that Albert had given her the night before. Prince Albert's brooch remains part of the royal jewellery collection and is passed from monarch to monarch. This brooch was often worn by Elizabeth II. Victoria gave the Turkish diamonds to her seventh child, the Duke of Kent and Strathern. His wife Louise wore the necklace to numerous important events. Much to her dismay, the set was sold in London in 1970. The fate of the earrings from the Turkish set is not known. According to one account, Victoria gave them to her daughter-in-law, Queen Alexandra, who often wore them as pendants on her necklaces. Alexandra's diamond pendants are now owned by the Norwegian royal family. Queen Sonia wears them as earrings. I think these earrings are very reminiscent of those worn by Queen Victoria, but whether they are this one or not is another story.